Hi everybody, it's been a really long time since I've done a full-length video, but I do have one for you today. There are additional photos on the blog that show how to get that decor tape from Hazel and Ruby onto a canvas and make sure there's no air bubbles. I'm using their decor tape and their stencil masks, and right now I just put a little bit of petroleum jelly, and any brand will work, around the edges where I'm going to want that wood grain to show through. I'm using some Basics acrylic paint from Liquitex, and I'm just going to paint that over the entire surface. And you're going to want to get right up next to your stencil masks, but you want to lightly paint over it. If you really scrub your paintbrush across those stencil masks, sometimes you'll get paint underneath them. So you want to get all the way to the edges, but use a really light hand. And you can see here that I'm going back and forth in different directions, side to side, up and down, diagonally, trying to do everything I can to get into all the little crevices so that you're going to have a nice crisp letter when you're done. I'm also adding a little bit to the sides, but I'm kind of just dry brushing it because I'm going to want that wood grain to show through on the sides as well. And now you're going to need to dry the paint, and I'm using a heat gun to do that. And then you'll use some baby wipes. And I did kind of fast forward through the drying time. You don't want to dry it completely so that the paint won't come off the background, but you want it to be at least looking semi-matte when you start to wipe the paint away. And you can see there's spots where it's still wet, and when you wipe the paint away, it almost leaves kind of a whitewash effect on the background, and sometimes you'll need to use a clean baby wipe afterward so that you have the nice clean wood grain in the background. See, and that's what I'm doing right here. And then you can see the difference in the color of the background paper. Any brand of baby wipe will work, even just damp paper towels will work. And then you're going to use petroleum jelly again, just in the areas where you want the paint to resist or to come off. And now I'm using a different color. This is just light blue with a Basics paint from Liquitex. So I'm just adding the light blue around the edges, and I'm bringing it in towards the center. You have to remember where you've put the petroleum jelly so that you know. You do need to put a pretty thick layer over the areas where you've put the petroleum jelly, but you also need to make sure that that's not the only place where you put the different color of paint. So after I dried it, then I'm again using the baby wipes. And I'm removing all the paint, definitely in the areas where I had the petroleum jelly, but then again wiping across the whole canvas and bringing it up any spot where it might come up as well, so that you've got more of the paint underneath, the color of the paint underneath showing through. And then again, you'll want to make sure that if it's done a whitewash effect, that you use a clean baby wipe. And you can see the color of the background again become brighter. So after drying, we're going to do the petroleum jelly again. And you'll notice that I'm putting it in smaller and smaller areas each time. I'll find like a little spot that I think looks really cool, the way that the paint is peeling up, and that's where I'm putting it on. and then just barely on the edges in some spots. Now I'm using white, again in the Basics paint from Liquitex. And this time I'm going to cover the entire background again like I did the first time. Now I'm going to want almost full coverage for this last coat of paint. I am putting it on pretty thickly in certain areas, but then when it gets to this point, I'm just kind of dry brushing it because I want that the other paint colors to show through. So I kind of just barely dry brush over that last bit. I dry it again with the heat gun, and I'm using the baby wipe over the entire canvas again. You could also use a wet washcloth or wet paper towels. You don't have to use baby wipes. I just prefer the nice smell of the baby wipes. And it doesn't do anything to the canvas. As long as you're not using ones that are really full of alcohol or something like that. So skipped ahead a little bit, and now using the clean one again. And that's pretty much it for the background. Now here's an extra tip. This is not a regular tip for using the Hazel and Ruby stencil masks, but because I'm using them differently than most people would and actually using a heat gun over the top and drying, I have pretty much stuck the stencil masks to the canvas. So I'm trying to release the edges of the stencil masks. They will release as long as that acrylic paint is not sticking it down. So you want to cut around the edges with a craft knife. Be very careful that you don't cut too far so that you don't cut through the decor tape as well. And if you do, you can actually stick the decor tape back down if it does get cut through. Then once you're done with all of the letters, you're going to use some kind of a decoupage medium over the top and dry that. Then I put the stencil masks back on offset and used a Spectrum Noir alcohol pen to outline the letters. For the word beauty, I actually outlined them first and then used the craft knife. And I'm showing you the hardest letter to remove from the canvas so that you see that you're going to have to take some time on some of these letters. Be really careful on the corners. So a letter like the A has a lot of corners, and that little teeny tiny section in the center of the A, you have to be really, really careful with that. Otherwise, if you pull it off quickly, you may remove the paint as well. So you have to be really careful with these when removing them. So after you removed them all, then I did the decoupage medium again. Now the decoupage medium likes to bead on top of the decor tape, so what you might have to do is put it on, blend it, and use a heat gun right after, blend it again, use a heat gun, so that it will blend in. And what you're doing is not just adding, a shiny bit over it, but you're actually sealing down the edges of the paint. For the ampersand, I used a Sharpie, and this I should have shown using the Spectrum Noir pen on the other words because it goes on beautifully, very easily. But using a Sharpie, I like the really fine tip of it, but going over paint and decoupage paint at that, is really difficult, and you have to keep kind of wiping off the tip of your fine tip Sharpie on a piece of paper like I do here. And it takes a little bit of time. It's a nice effect. It looks really clean and neat. But the Spectrum Noir pens, they have a thicker line, but it's so much easier. It's incredibly fast, and you never have to wipe off the tip of the pen. You just want to make sure that you don't use the pens over wet paint or wet decoupage, because that could ruin your pens. The last tip I'm going to show is using my Twinkle Dust glitter and some glue gloss from Clear Snap. The glue gloss has a little lip gloss type applicator that helps you to get into little precision areas. And it dries pretty quickly, so you'll want to do one letter at a time. After you have the letter covered, you sprinkle the Twinkle Dust glitter over it and then just kind of blow it off. So this is the finished canvas, and I've got step-by-step photos with stamping using my Mixed Media Inks chalks and adding more details and finishing touches. And you can see those on the blog. And here is the blog address. And if you'd like to look me up, here are all of the different places where you can find me online and even my P.O. box. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again next time.